Hey guys, we're back and now we're going to multiply complex numbers. So first, in example 4, we're just going to multiply the imaginary numbers because we have to know how to multiply imaginary numbers to be able to multiply complex numbers. So we need to also remember back when we learned what I was. I is the square root of -1. So if we were going to square I, that would mean we're taking the square root of -1 and squaring it. What that does is the square and the square root cancel, and the square root of -1 squared, so I cancel that, means you get -1. So big thing here, guys. I squared equals -1. Okay, that's bad. Okay, let me recircle that. Okay, so we're going to use that fact right now to multiply the imaginary numbers. So when we're multiplying, basically you kind of act like I is an x variable, okay? First, in letter A, I have 3 times 5i. I just multiply 3 times 5 because those are both real numbers. And then my I is just kind of stuck on there like a variable. So that's 15i. Letter B, however, is I times 4i. So I could write that in a different order if you wanted to. 4 times I times I. Well, I times I would be I squared. And remember, what I squared is -1. So we need to substitute -1 in for I squared, and 4 times -1 is a -4. As a rule of thumb, the only kind of I you will have in an answer is a single I. You will never have an I squared, an I cubed, an I to the 4th, etc. All right, letter C. Now I have -7i times 3i. So -7 times 3 is -21. I times I is I squared. Remembering that I squared is -1, that means I'm going to take -21 times the -1, and that gives me +21. Finally, D, I have -9 times 8i. So that is simply -72i. So I want you to notice that A and D still have i's in them because I was taking a real number times an imaginary number. So they ended up with an imaginary. But B and C both ended up being real numbers because I was taking I times I, which brings us back out to the real set of real numbers because that is -1. All right, so whenever we're squaring an I, that number is going to be real. Okay, so we're going to do A, B, and C in this video and save D, E, and F for class. So now we're multiplying the complex numbers. So to multiply complex numbers, we distribute, just like we do, again, if we had polynomials with x's. So letter A, I have -3i times 7 plus 6i. So I need to distribute this -3 into this complex number. So -3i times 7 is going to be -21i. And -3i times a positive 6i is going to be -18i squared. Oh boy, I squared. Don't forget that I squared is -1. So this is -21i minus 18 times -1. So that's really -21i plus 18. And we do always want to write our answers in the A plus BI form. So write your real part first, so that would be 18, and then minus 21i. Okay. Letter B, 4 plus 9i times 6 minus 2i. So this kind of looks like a binomial times a binomial. So we need to distribute 4 to everything in the second complex number, and then 9i doing the same thing. So 4 times 6 is 24. 4 times -2i is -8i. 9i times 6 is 54i. And 9i times -2 is a -18i squared. That's another I squared situation. So remember, we need to change that to a -1. So that's -18 times a -1, which we know that is going to be +18. Then I have these like terms in the middle. And then I have also a real number out here. So I'm just highlighting my like terms. Okay, so my -18i squared turned into a +18, and I have the real number 24 out front. So I'm going to take 24 plus 18. And then my imaginary parts, negative 8i plus 54i. And here we go. 24 plus 18, that is 42. And negative 8i plus 54 is a positive 46i. And that is your answer for B. Finally, let's do C. I would encourage you to pause the video right now and try it on your own and then see if you got the same thing I did. So we're going to start by distributing negative 3. So negative 3 times 7, negative 21. Negative 3 times 4i, negative 12i. 12i times 7, go ahead and use your calculator, people, because you know I did. That's 84i. And 12i times 4i, that's a positive 48i squared. However, guys, I squared is negative 1. We have to remember that. So this guy right here is really like 48 times negative 1. So that's really a negative 48. And that can be put together with my negative 21 out front. When I combine those two things, negative 21 and a negative 48, I get negative 69. And then I have these imaginary parts in the middle. And when I combine those, negative 12i plus 84i, I get a positive 72i. Please make a special note that all of my answers are in a plus bi form, and you will never, ever, ever have an I squared left over in your answer because that is negative 1. All right, guys, that's it. See you tomorrow.